So I'm Chongor Bias. I'm with Design Terminal. Basically, we support entrepreneurship in different fields from design, fashion, urbanism, and technology. And I am leading the technology division at Design Terminal.
Hi, my name is Miklos Kovács. Actually, we introduced ourselves twice already. We are a US-based VC fund focusing on the CE region, and happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Balázs. I am the CEO of IoT Labs. A product house focuses on automotive IoT innovations, and basically that's it.
Hi, this is Martin. I founded a company back in 2002. I sold it to Yahoo, and I started angel investing into software, biotechnology companies, and lately I started a hardware startup. That's about it.
Okay, cool. So, I noticed, actually Chongor and I met for the first time about a month ago when we were in Austin at South by Southwest. And there was, by the way, a really cool Hungarian presence. There was like the whole afternoon session about Hungary with a panel discussion between different people. Veronica Pistor from the Bridge Foundation was there, but she couldn't make it today, unfortunately. So, and I noticed you guys use this hashtag, and this is one of those successful things that you see a lot nowadays, that a city ecosystem adopts a hashtag. Copenhagen has it with the CPH FTW. Krakow has this with, I think, was it, oh my God, Krakow or something. And you guys have made MVP. So what's the story behind that? Who can tell the...
Basically, it was an adaptation of a campaign called Made in New York. So basically, New York, Mayor Bloomberg and the city came out with this campaign about celebrating digital entrepreneurship in New York City. So they made a cool website, an offline PR campaign about, and it was basically funders telling a story about why they like to be in New York and why they like to work there. So basically, we adopted that.
Okay, and it's working. Like,
it does work. Actually, what I realized that it's really important to somehow build up role models, and that's what actually Bridge Budapest is working on, because there is tech entrepreneurship is not on the mental map of youngsters, and it needs to be changed, and we need role models for that.
Right. Well, what really helps is if every time something cool is happening with startups in Budapest, like this event, for instance, or other stuff that is happening, or this big conference that you guys are having in a couple of days, the Craft Conference, right? You had the Smart Mobile Conference a very short time ago, is to kind of promote that hashtag because people will notice it and associate it with Budapest. So it's a piece of advice for everyone. It works really well in other cities. If we switch to Martin, maybe you can tell us a little more things about your company Index Tool. So you built it actually here in Hungary?
Yeah. Yes.
And, okay. And how big did it get in terms of employees by the time you got acquired?
We were about 50 people.
15 or 50?
50.
50. Okay. So what is your what are the challenges like? What kind of stuff did you have to go through and learn when you were building it here?
So back in 2002, when I started this company, there was no ecosystem, whatsoever, and I think that was the most challenging part. Nobody wanted to finance a software company, so if I mentioned the word internet, people freaked out. So that was challenging, and I think today we have I would almost dare to say healthy ecosystem around here. So there are angels, there are early stage startups, VC funds, seed funds, with all the weird thing around the Jeremy system that are, sometimes we complain about, but there is money, there are startups, people have role models, and there are success stories. So I kind of envy startups that are young today.
When you say that it was very challenging back then and no one did it and people freaked out, did you notice that? Well, obviously with investors, but was that also with staff or getting customers maybe locally?
Well, I mean, there are people who look for safety, and we had the same kind of anxiety back then. So there are young people and young engineers who like working on a product, and like working on cool stuff, we could employ them and excite them, back them, and the same is happening today. And then there are some people who prefer to work for big companies, and you can't use enough pitches and time to kind of get them over to the startup world. So that particularly hasn't really changed.
That's still hard, right? Balázs, if we turn to you, I know I got to know you a couple of years ago when you were pretty much the most visible person of the Budapest ecosystem. So you've seen its growth from the very beginning to where it is today. What are the biggest accomplishments, but also the challenges in your view? Like if you look at the past 2-3 years that you've been involved in building up this community.
What I've seen, I think we learned a lot during the past couple of years, including myself and the other actors of the local ecosystem. So there were some failures, both on the startups, both on the investor side, so which was harmful, but at the same time pretty useful on the long term. So more and more people coming back afterwards, because this entrepreneurial spirit is something that you pursue even if you fail a couple of times. So and try to do better, try to avoid the same mistakes, try to do other mistakes, and also there were some success stories that helped us to be on the map in Europe, and I think this is very helpful. And yeah, so the know-how is getting better and better. So.
And why are you doing automotive? Is this something that Hungary is strong? You have more skilled people for that here, or it's not
actually,
related?
No, it has nothing to do with the local, let's say, circumstances or environment. I jumped into the Internet of Things space 2 years ago, and I was really looking at the opportunities from the business perspective rather than the technological, geeky perspective. And this is what we see as a huge problem here, that there are a lot of cars out there. There are a lot of data generated by cars itself, but nobody uses this. So this is rather we are trying to find a solution for this problem, and we've seen that this is a growing space with a lot of action, a lot of things happening there. Mm-hmm. And car manufacturers are also looking at the startup space. So it looks like a good time to do something and help them with better digital design thinking, because this is something different what they done in the past.
Interesting. If you turn on to Miklos, I've noticed that we talked today a couple of times about finding out what your ecosystem is good in. I know you guys are looking all over Europe. You have very, very close contacts with the US as a fund. You co-invest with many other funds. You've invested a couple of times successfully. If you look at Budapest as a place for startups, what are the specialties what are those local skills that stand out? Like what do you think that Budapest is strong in?
Actually, when I received this question from you, because it's no secret that you share this question with us in email, I thought this was one of the hardest questions that you asked, because, I mean, number one thing that we always mention, why an entrepreneur should come to Budapest is always, price and cost of development, and why is it cheap?
Yeah, but Belgrade and Sofia also.
And Belgrade and Sofia also. Right. And, nobody wants to compete on price. Nobody wants to compete on cheap development time in the long run. So the question is, why is Budapest unique in the region? And I would say we definitely have a very good location within Eastern Europe. I mean, if you look at the map, it's very easy to reach by hopping into the car 5 or 6 capital cities in the region. Mm-hmm. And for example, compared to Warsaw, from Warsaw, you have to drive at least 6 hours to reach another capital city. Yeah. From Budapest, you can reach Prague, Bratislava, Vienna very easily, Ljubljana, Zagreb, Belgrade. This is one of the reasons why we use Budapest as a hub. And this might be one advantage which is very hard to replicate, right? Mm-hmm. So I think our position, geolocation, can be a differentiating factor, but it's not a slam dunk. We have to work on it, but this might position us as a hub in the region to attract, on one side, entrepreneurs to come here and start their companies here, and also VCs to have a regional hub here and run around the region and invest companies in the region.
Right. Yeah, I know you guys had a direct flight to China even. I don't know if it still exists, but I remember a couple of years ago there was a direct flight to Beijing from Budapest, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
but
that's
I wouldn't
pretty-
consider Beijing as part of the local Eastern European ecosystem, but
Okay, okay. Well, that's connection, right? That's what I'm asking. Chango, you know, if we turn on to you, I'm going to ask you also a controversial question. So, as we learned yesterday, we visited Design Terminal, very impressive space. I remember visiting Budapest many years ago, and it was like a old blocked up, you know, old bus terminal, which was dysfunctional. Now it's a pretty cool space. You mentioned that you guys are a public-funded organization. Probably most of that money is EU, I assume, or it is the local. Is the city or country? Country, okay. So there's, you know, there's kind of a backlash nowadays because there's so much public funding out there. You know, I've experienced this myself. I've managed a fund which was almost fully backed by the government. There is this idea that maybe the governments are flooding the system with money and disincentivizing people to actually hustle and fight harder. How are you guys viewing this? Like, how are you making a difference with public funds?
Well, it's a tough question, and actually, I had when I visited San Francisco a few weeks ago, I met with Stan Temkiwi, and we were having a great discussion about this, and he was giving this example about maybe the U.S. doesn't give that much grant, but they put a lot of money into, you know, developing the military, and it has it loop backs to so still the government is there to invest, maybe not directly, but actually, as we believe, we don't do grants, so we don't give entrepreneurs money. What we think is responsible is finding projects and finding initiative which doesn't compete with the private existing institutions. So there are enough private institutions that finances good startups that have traction. We have nothing to do there. We try to choose projects which is rather complementary with the private initiatives, if you know what I mean. So no private initiative could take 5 startups and take them to South by Southwest for free. Mm-hmm. Although it's a great opportunity for those startups and they couldn't afford it, but no private would do that. Again, we are coming up with an incubation program in September, and we decided our focus, our scope, to focus on very, very early stage, almost idea stage startups, because nobody could hold their hands. So we believe that it's responsible to not compete with the private sector, rather be complementary and have them.
Right. Yeah, and you brought, you know, together with iEurope, you guys brought us here. So those are like the good things that they do. Cool. If you know, if we look, maybe this is a question to all of you, and each one of you can answer a bit of it. If you look at Budapest today as a hub for startups, you know, whether it is very much one or it's still developing, that's, you know, a matter of perspective. What needs to be done to make it better? Like, what would you guys, in the middle, we can also ask maybe to the audience after this, what do you guys see that has to be done? Like, what would you encourage? Maybe like 1 or 2 things per person. If we start with you, Miklos.
I would just continue what Csongor started to say about government funding and the involvement of the government in the local ecosystem. Actually, our ecosystem is very young. It started 5 years ago, and it was actually the government money which helped it to start. So I think this Jeremy program is not, you know, good or bad. It's just a double-edged sword, like every other, you know, government or state intervention. It has a good side and a bad side. The good side is that it starts something that wouldn't have started anyway. The bad side is that, to a certain extent, it definitely distorts competition, you know, distorts valuations, etc. The challenge for the next 5 years is definitely move away from this model, both for the entrepreneurs and the VCs. For the entrepreneurs to get used to, you know, raise from venture capital funds who are handling private money and generate, you know, market returns. And this is also true for VC managers, VC management funds.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Balázs, is there anything?
Yeah. In my point of view, we are quite good at the development area, but we have to still develop our skills and our competencies on the HR side, on commercialization, business development, sales. And this is, I think, most of the startups struggling with. And this is definitely something that where we need help. So using the competencies of US-based people or German-based people, as we do in terms of sales and customer validation. This is very important, and I really feel it in our daily activities that it helps a lot. And also the product design, this is something that we need to emphasize more than earlier. So something that works should be something that users love it. So, and I think that's why we are better with B2B products rather than B2C, because this is also space that needs to be improved.
So basically design and
the
business
design
development.
and business development, sales, yeah.
Interesting, okay.
Just to underline that, I mean, if you think about it, the company where we're sitting today, like Logmein or Ustream, have all U.S. co-founders. So they have a Hungarian R&D facility, and they are very successful. But their real go-to-market and global success story was to, at least to a great extent, to be attributed to the co-founders, to the U.S. Co-founders. Prezi is kind of a different animal, but there again, the founders have very smartly, decided to bring in somebody who has international experience. So there. What I expect as a next stage for us is that once these companies IPO or are sold in a strategic sale, many of the option holders will kind of emerge as angel investors and kind of spread that knowledge and facilitate or kind of help today's startups or the new startups flourish.
So you're saying there's visibly a connection with the fact that the companies that are becoming successful out of Budapest have the business development skills set in their founding team, which is usually related to U.S. experience, right? So this one and Ustream have co-founders, and then Prezi attracted someone who had that experience as well.
Yeah.
So basically, if we want to see more Prezis come out of this city, then you would need to build that kind of teams, or?
Absolutely. I mean, you either need to grow up in the U.S. or kind of spend a lot of time in the U.S. But this is kind of a general, applicable to European startups. I mean, Scandinavia is kind of an exception here. Sweden is doing very, very nicely. They have a tradition of in trade, and maybe that history makes them unique. But if you look at other European startups, you don't really see that many real global success stories.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Miklos, I know you guys are looking at the ecosystem. Anything anything in particular you see that can attract more companies to Budapest, like from Europe? Because we already mentioned that you're competing, with some other European capitals for attention. In terms of finance, for instance, is it very competitive here to get invested in? Like, because I know that from my days when I was running a Jeremy fund, that there are a lot of Jeremy investors in Budapest. But how does the investment scene look like?
Hungary or whole Eastern Europe?
Well, Budapest.
Budapest is. The local VC landscape is really dominated by EU-funded, government-funded, government-backed funds. So that's definitely true. It also depends on the company. So if you find a really good target, a very attractive target, then there you will see that VCs are lining up for the option to invest, and I think these are the best opportunities. In terms of financing. As I said, the challenge for the next 5 years is definitely to attract, traditional LPs to the region, and this is the next step that we have to make.
And that's basically local. If someone made money successfully locally, that would be the strongest.
Absolutely. And just continue at this point. On the entrepreneur side, what we see is there are a lot of entrepreneurs, 20, 25 years old, which is great. And I think in the last 5 years, we just did a tremendous job in learning a lot, from Lean Startup and all this methodology. So I think it's great. What I think is missing and might be a challenge for the next X years is how can we bring this knowledge to people who spend like 10, 15 years in the industry, have a good domain expertise, but they do not know how to make the next step and start their business. And how can we bring this knowledge to them? I think it's also a challenge. Yeah, because if you can attract those people, they can build very attractive targets for a VC investor.
Right. Yeah, and also with what Martin said, once the local companies start getting to liquidity moments, how do you actually empower and make sure that a lot of that money that's being earned by those people that are involved in these companies flows back into the ecosystem. For instance, the country which I call my home base, which is Bulgaria, which is Sofia, we had a $260 million exit a couple months ago when Telerik got acquired. And right now everyone is looking and trying to figure out how much of that money is going to flow back, because we're not really sure, because it wasn't very clear, for instance, what the option pool of the company was, et cetera, et cetera. So those examples have to take place, right? You need local companies to become successful so that the people that were involved with those companies can actually start becoming investors or founding new companies with those newfound insights. Interesting. Before we close out this panel, maybe what is a good thing, because we're talking about, you guys saw a lot of successful examples of people doing cool stuff today. We're talking about Budapest right now. How can we make sure that Budapest is on the map? So the questions that I asked the panel, maybe some people want to ask something similar or have a specific thing that they think Budapest needs. I don't know if anyone wants to make a comment on this or suggest something, or maybe ask the panelists, what they think about developing the ecosystem in Budapest. Any takers for this? Anything anyone wants to know about building a company in Budapest and how to? John, do you have an idea? Or?
Yeah, actually I would love to add one more thing, which is truly important. Everybody were speaking like a half year ago about how should Budapest become a startup capital and how should be the best in the region. And I think it's totally the wrong approach, because it's not a zero-sum game. We are, as Miklos already said, the proximity to other capitals and markets is so close, and we still don't know nothing about what's going on in Slovakia, what's going on in Czech, what's going on in Bulgaria. And I think we need to improve on that, because a lot of many similar projects, many similar lessons, what we should be able to easily to learn each other. And that's why actually I'm a big fan of doing every startup events, doing every startup forums in English, because then it becomes accessible for people who doesn't necessarily speak Hungarian. And I think a lot of people looking at weird and asking why we shouldn't communicate in Hungarian, but I think the startup first shouldn't know boundaries, and yeah, that's my point.
Right.
Small thing, but important.
Wonderful. Okay, guys, last question to ask the panelists a question. Anything you always wanted to know about building startups? Yep. So let me just take it. You can speak loud? Okay, good for you.
My question is, I'm really interested in your personal vision, what will happen in the next 5 years in Budapest.
Yeah, your vision for the next 5 years. And funnily enough, that's one of the questions that I emailed you guys and didn't ask. So your vision for Budapest in 5 years from now, right?
Actually, yeah, the metrics on big attractions, how many exits, how big will the whole ecosystem be?
How many exits? What do you think is realistic?
So, it's. I mean, I can say anything, unless you come back to me in 5 years and check on those numbers. But I do think that there will be a kind of a $1 billion plus exit, not necessarily in Hungary, but of a Hungarian company. There will be, a couple of 100 million plus exits, and kind of a handful of technology exits in the 20 to 50 million range. I do think that's absolutely realistic, looking at the landscape and the maturity of the companies that I'm seeing, and coming back to the previous topic, can then further accelerate the ecosystem. The quality of the quality of the companies is distributed very unevenly between the Jeremy funds. So I would almost dare to say that those exits will actually come from 2 or 3 funds, and the rest will kind of write down their investments.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, I think we are in the middle of a learning curve, so we will definitely see some good success story and other companies that fail, and by the help of this knowledge, I think we are going to learn that building digital products and companies is also a kind of career choice, just like joining a multinational. And I think it's very important to see that this is something that you need to improve further and to develop yourself within. So I think we are on the right track towards this direction.
I'm not sure that I clearly understand the question, but I think it was about success stories in Budapest in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think the question is always, how do you define success? And usually people say, in order to be successful, you have to raise, tens of millions of euros, move to the US and sell your company for 100 million plus, generating super rare 10x, 100x returns to your investors. But if you have and we know that, for example, LogMe, Impreza, Ustream, these usual suspects are achieve this goal or on their way to achieve this goal. But we can have a much broader definition of success. We can also, focus on companies who are solving local problems in a city or in a country, achieving only a smaller exit, and generating some decent returns to the entrepreneur, and also a lot of experience and learning to be able to start their next venture, bootstrap to a certain point, be much more credible in front of investors when he's raising money for his second venture, also raise more money much earlier. So I think these small local stories, I think we will see much more in the next couple of years. Also companies, I think, can be deemed successful which didn't raise VC money. I think one example is Riedel that we saw here. Other one might be a notable example from Serbia. It's called Nordeus. Yeah, successful gaming company scaling now globally, reaching 100 million users without raising a dime of VC money. Yeah. I think this is also something that we need to talk about. And the lesson learned from this is that the best source of financing that you can have is revenues. And any other thing, including VC money, including EU grants, are just the last ones. So focus on revenues. And this is also a success story. And the third group of companies that I would mention is companies that never moved to either Western Europe or to the US, but made their success here. I think one of the notable examples is a very simple doctor appointment booking app coming from Poland. It's called Doc Planner. Started in Poland, scaling out in Eastern Europe, now entering Russia and Turkey, reaching 5, 6, 7 million users, several million revenue in annually.
Yeah, those are pretty rare stories, right? Because
rare
it almost
stories.
Always has to do with US market entry.
Yes, yes. But they never moved to the US. They are not even targeting Western European countries. And so you can pull it off in the region if you want to.
Interesting. Okay. So basically, I guess the bottom line is that you don't have to move to Silicon Valley. You should definitely travel and meet people as much as you can and learn, but it is doable to build successful companies in Hungary.
Yeah. So it's not a typical one, but I think it's still a success.
Interesting.
So I think we will see much more of these stories here locally.
Perfect. Okay, guys, I'd like to thank you very much. Big hand for our panelists today. People who are... guys who are doing great stuff in Budapest and with whom you should work together.